Okay, so I was trying to explain the second picture is indicating equality and equity. And this is what is the ideal. The other one is the abnormality, and then the second one is the ideal situation in all over the countries of the world. Next slide. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that the statement of intent is that I want us to understand that social protection system all over the world is now a target of Sustainable Development Goal 1, end poverty in all its forms and everywhere. And it's a key area of any community development practice to understand the political, social, cultural, and factors impacting on local communities, particularly marginalized groups. And this forms the fulcrum of this presentation. That means the presentation has been based on making us understand that we should understand these environmental factors that are impacting on local communities. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. Why am I insisting on that? Because it's a process where community members come together to take collective action and generate solutions to common problems. Invariably, what I'm saying is that I'm considering this discourse as a community wherein we are to come together and take collective action and generate solutions to common problems by helping collectively to identify what is the destination of or outcome of social protection projects, and then what is the process? How can the journey be shaped into the ideal situation? Next slide. Now we have conceptual exposition, which is on community development as a practice and as a academic discipline. And then we have one of the concepts we use extensively is social inclusion, which is the ability to integrate either through the labor market, through welfare, through interpersonal relationship, and the rest of them. Next slide. And then to protect and now I base this presentation on the system theory, meaning that each and every relevant part of the component of a system collectively is meant to answer or some underlying social problems. And then the content and the scope of the contract indicate that if promises are made in the social contract, it can be better be served. Now, one of the shortcomings of this theory is that it's not meant to answer the ideological and political questions about how much and the type of social protection a society is offered. It only facilitates the discussion about how to organize political choices in a relatively better way. Next slide. Now, then we also understand that there is milestones for social protection. Now, you should understand that in the actual sense, the milestones for social protection is common in every community, right from humanity. Now, these milestones here are mostly indicators of the formal milestones of social protection. As we shall come to see later, social protection is divided into two, formal and informal. Now, these are milestones that shows the formal adaptation of social protection. We have the 2004, 2006, 2008, 2010, and over 100 countries signed up for social protection in the Copenhagen Declaration and Program of Action at the United Nations World Summit for Social Development. And then the most significant and strategic one is Sustainable Development Goal, which is now on. Next slide. Now, to understand social protection, we try to look at some definitions, and the definitions from International Labour Organization, from the World Bank, from Institute of Development Studies. Next slide. We also try to look at definition from United Nations Children's Fund, from Food and Agricultural Organization of United Nations, and from Social Protection Interagency Board. All of these definitions have one thing in common. They are talking about socioeconomic, political, environmental vulnerabilities of individuals, and then the keyword there is protecting and promoting livelihood. That's the common denominator that is cutting across all the definition. And this denominator is also cutting across both formal and informal social protection agencies or systems. Next slide. Now, in order to understand social protection intervention, we try to project by this figure you are seeing. You can see the outer circle is promotional measures aimed at enhancing real income and capabilities, including poverty reduction oriented macroeconomic and institutional policy. Then this middle cycle, which is preventive measures directly seeking to prevent, to avert deprivation in various ways, such as financial inclusion for low-income households or social network. Then the inner cycle, which is very, very significant also, is a protective measures that are specific of guaranteeing relief from deprivation, for instance, targeting resource transfer programs or sustainable livelihood. So this also social protection intervention cut across both formal and informal social protection mechanisms. Next slide. Now, in order to understand social protection, we also want you to understand that it has some major elements. Some of these major elements include the labor market, social insurance, social assistance, macro and area-based schemes to protect communities, and child protection. As I keep on saying, this cut across both formal and informal social protection mechanisms. Next slide. Now, this is a very famous Algerian French philosopher, and then he tries to give us an idea of what is social protection. He said, when it is unlimited hospitality that mostly is common in our villages, is to give the new arrival all of one's home and oneself, to give him or her one's own, our own, without asking a name or compensation or the fulfillment of even the smallest condition. This informal social protection. Somebody comes to you, you don't know him, you attend to him and then give him everything that will make his life better. On the other hand, the laws in the plural, those are rights and duties that are always conditioned and conditional as they are defined by the contemporary settings, and in particular across family, civil society, and the state. Now, the line between the formal and informal is within this basic limit. Next slide. Now, what are the features of formal and informal protection? The formal protection is guided by economic and social principles, financed from public revenues, and they have institutional arrangement and rules and regulation and accountability mechanism. While the informal is guided by religious and cultural principles, family, kinship, and is financed by individuals or communities. Now, one of the characteristics that is very interesting about the informal social protection is that this is where mostly community development comes in, is the best way for them, villagers, communities, to provide for their inevitable rainy days was to be generous. So in our villages and communities, if you are going to provide for inevitable rainy days, you have to be generous so that when it is your turn, you can also get that generosity from others. Then the greater the amount of risks, the greater the extent of sharing. Then smallholders are faced with substantial risks that help to create social systems of mutual assistance. Peasants tend to be risk averse. They develop social arrangement and relationship that help them to redistribute surplus and protect them in bad years. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you very much. Then this slide, there's a misplacement. This slide is supposed to come later on. So please, let's skip this slide. We'll explain it later on. Now, in as much as we are talking about social protection, what we have said is a situation of stable context. Now, what of the unstable context? Now, whenever the social contract theory between the government and citizen is weak or non-existent, then providing protection to citizens no longer apply. And this means there is more vulnerability, especially to the pastoralists. And you know, in Africa, almost all Africa, we have pastoralists. And these people are very vulnerable to farmers, urban residents, climate change, shortage of water and pasture, encouragement of commercial enterprises and national reserve onto grazing lands, livestock diseases, and conflict with neighbors. Now, this category of human beings or Africans have this, they are living in an unstable context of social protection. And as such, their nature of social protection is very, very unique. And then the same thing with refugees and internally displaced persons. You should understand that 85% of the world refugees are in the lower and middle income countries, which is mostly in Africa. And then you now talk about forcibly displaced populations. They are also excluded from social protection. And even when they are served by international finance humanitarian programs, they are often short-term and they're unsustainable. Next slide. Now we quickly move on to the issue of social protection coverage, because we want to know whether social protection coverage is also very important. This social protection coverage includes the extent to which different risks are covered, ranging from the unprotected to the protected, and taking into cognizance the peculiar or particular vulnerabilities of each population group, because we have differences in age, gender, and place of residence. Next slide. Now, this social protection coverage include, basically in summary, it means there is universal coverage, there is residual coverage, and then there is coverage as a privilege. Now, very specific, that means there is child-related risk, there is longevity risk, and then there is income loss risk, which is supposed to be covered in terms of social protection. Next slide. Now, when you are talking about social protection coverage, it means there must be an agenda of national definition of social protection. Then there has to be risk mapping, and then programs are also mapped, and then the coverage function must be defined, and then the individual social protection coverage must also be included. Now, the arrow moving up and down indicates that it cuts across both formal and informal. So it depends upon where you are putting your emphasis on. If it is on formal, then this is what you are going to do. If it is informal, it's the same thing that you're going to measure in terms of social protection coverage. Next slide. Now, this table is trying to show you some of the existing features of social protection program taking place now in Africa. There is school feeding programs, there is a cash transfer, there is a public works, and the rest of them. Now, this is not in any way trying to, the list is not exhaustive, and then it's just to show us graphically some of the programs that are taking place in Africa right now, so that you can remember within the context of the social vulnerability groups, so that the pastoralists, are they covered in this? Next slide. Now, when you are assessing social protection system, it's very important to ask yourself, what is the coverage of the risks and the needs? What is the internal consistency and the external consistency of the coverage or the protection system and what is its sustainability. Now, this is very important because anybody who's going to the community to assess the social protection system, either formal or informal, we must have to take into cognizance this, because in the actual sense, when you are going to the communities, you can come across both formal and informal social protection system. Next slide. Now, the slide that is related to the other slide that I mentioned. Now, I'm trying to do a case study of the social protection project in Kaduna State, Nigeria. This is a project that is handled by, there's a team from non-governmental organization, and then there's a team from the government side under the Open Government Partnership. And then the government-led plan activities was engagement of more community-based targeting groups to saturate the entire society, enrollment of more beneficiaries, and then social protection legislation was also in place. Next slide. Now, then the non-governmental organization, and this is where most of us comes in, role is to the tracking of social protection intervention across the state, tracking of the targeted process of social security register, and then quarterly social protection budget performance review with their stakeholders. Now, if you go to up where the other slide I say we should suspend is a misplacement of slide. Go up a little, go up, go up, go up, go up, go up, go up. Yeah, this is it. No, back, you have missed it. Go up, down, sorry, down, 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 down. That's it. Now, what we are trying to say here is that the expected outcome of that collaboration is that there was a credible social register of the poor and vulnerable households, and then there was increase in the enrollment of various social protection intervention, and then there was an increased number of beneficiaries across assessing social protection intervention, and then there was a bill on that, and then there's increased coverage of poor and vulnerable households captured in the state social register. And then the actual budget performance track and reported through quarterly SP budgetary performance review with stakeholders. Now, I've been a party to this, I've been a participant to this project. In the subsequent time, we are going to do a more thorough exposition of this relationship so as to understand whether or not social protection is leading any result in the state. Next slide, I'll go down, sorry, go down to the other final slides. Go down, go down, go down. Good. Now, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm almost coming to the end of my presentation. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that this is a poster to community development. And that is the extremely poor need safety net and social protection measures. The vulnerable, chronically vulnerable needs transfer on temporary basis. Those who are vulnerable to transitory food insecurity need immediate food and cash-based relief measures. These are not usually vulnerable. Those who are not usually vulnerable to food insecurity need support to enable them to become more productive and competitive. These are the group of the elderly in the society. Now, this is what I consider as what is community development going to do in terms of, these are the questions that are generated, or the areas that are generated that community development can come in terms of social protection strategies or system. Next slide. Now, in conclusion, this paper seeks to contribute to the discussion on the area of community development and social protection by highlighting some of the salient areas of coverage between formal and informal social protection programs in the sub-Saharan Africa, and with the role of community development practitioners. What is the role of the community development practitioners? And the aim is that, basically, the aim is that without reflection, we go blindly on our way, creating more unintended consequences and failing to achieve anything useful. Next slide. Now, that is the conclusion. So what is the role of the community development practitioner? Community development practitioners must engage in community engagement by formal and informal interactions such as chance meetings and casual neighborhood, enhancement of community social capital, the value of social network, and the benefits of people receiving from and provided to others in their social network. So as this community, our responsibility as practitioners and academia is to come and put this puzzle together in order to make the community very viable, and then livelihood will now increase. If you look at the picture there, it depicts different forms of the shape. The painting of the shape is in different forms, meaning that in social protection program and in communities, you are going to encounter different contexts. And then how are you going to do that engagement? There has to be chance meeting and casual neighboring. And then there has to be enhancement of social capital, and then the value of social network and benefits people receive from and then provided to others in their social network. Next slide. Q&A, next slide. Thank you very much. I hope I've succeeded in bringing up this issue to the front burner, that we should all relate together and then see how we can be able to find the posers that I've mentioned earlier. I hope that I've not performed below expectation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abdul, for a wonderful presentation. And colleagues, join me in giving a round of applause to our presenter today for a job well done. Abdul, your assessment is whether you have done well. The truth of the matter is that adults are always right. And in community development, we are all generating knowledge and always sharpening each other. And so what you have done, you've given us a platform from which then we can continue to learn. You've done fairly well. And thank you very much for stepping up and leading the discussion from the front. So congratulations for a job well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, you have set a context, and one of the things that keeps on coming up as we talk about social protection, and as you have rightly put it, is that of course there is the informal and the formal, and to a large extent, as we talk about communities, communities are the place for communing. And then talk about community, then we are talking about fellowship, we are talking about networking, we are talking about linking up and bonding. And as we do that, of course, it's a place where we also find all the nourishment, be it spiritual, be it also material. And so the communities are the place where then we take care of each other. It's a place where we are able to ensure that we thrive as a human society. But then much of that has been done over time through informal settings, as you have rightly put it. But of course, increasingly, as we become more government oriented, then we have also formalized the same. And what I would like, I could say that we have professionalized social protection, whether to the good or to the worse, that's another story. Because again, as we professionalize social protection and institutionalize it, then of course there is also the risk of also losing the social and the personal touch that came with your neighbor and everybody else taking care of each other. And we keep on talking about Ubuntu from this side, where you are because the other person is, and therefore, and that's the point that we are raising. Of course, you are indicating that the pastoralists are people at need, But equally, as we become more and more urbanized, there is also the category of the urban poor, who also need quite a significant social protection. And often they can very easily so fall through the cracks. And so of course, then we professionalize and institutionalize social protection. Of course, the issue of a credible social register comes in, where then we can talk about accountability and on, so that those who need to be on the register then can be on the register. And that means then, of course, the duty of care by community development practitioners. But you have, that's where now, that's my take. But there is a lot more that then we need to do as we professionalize social protection. What can we also do on the other end, so that then again, we can also energize community systems, so that then we continue to generate social capital and the whole aspect of bonding that still holds us together, and we're able to be accountable to everybody else in our communities. Aware that most of the resources that are needed are found actually within communities. Governmental systems will come in the extreme of cases, and much of what they bring again may not even be adequate, and issues of sustainability come on board. So I don't wish to make a presentation on top of what Dr. Abdullahi has made. Mine is just to make some opening remarks, that then we can have an open forum. Gail, your hand has been up, and then we can have a Obo following. You're welcome. Gail.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just getting my unmuted. Anyway, it's nice to be with you, and I would just like to add to my thanks for the presentation, which I have found extremely stimulating and challenging, and addressing, I think, some of the really pertinent questions in community development in its broadest sense. I have two sort of points I'd like to ask you about. The first one is, you talked about the targeting sort of the chronically vulnerable. And I wondered in your work where people experiencing mental health problems came into that, what you've been experiencing or finding. Because from my experience, people with mental health problems, sometimes it can be short-term chronic, but more likely it is to be, the vulnerability is a long-term. And how do social protection measures kick in to support, I think, one of the very neglected groups globally? So that was the first point. My second point is, I was very pleased to see in one of your later slides, your reference to reflection and the importance of reflection. Now, from my own work, I think reflection is very important and it's commonly used, but we use it, I think, often without sort of thinking about what do we mean by reflection. And my area of interest is in transformative learning, and how, you know, that reflection and reflective practices are at the foundation of a transformative learning process. And I was just wondering, in your own work, about, you know, how you sort of see that reflection and moving into, because I think what you're talking about is a more transformative process to bring about the social changes that you've highlighted. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Let's take Obo, and then there are two also comments and a question on the chat. Then you can respond to those ones. Thank you, Obo.
Yes, thanks so much, Dr. Abdul. I really enjoyed the presentation because it's kind of like, it's a very important eye opener to what's going on. So thank you so much for the presentation. And I wanted to look at, because you, like, I am a Nigerian, you know, by birth, and we have the impression, based on the current crisis in Nigeria, there is this thing about the, you know, the headsmen and the pastoralists. So there's this natural inclination. You say, oh, these people are kind of like the problem, but from what you have presented, it kind of stimulated me to say, no, actually, these people are vulnerable and they need, there need to be a structure. You understand what I'm saying? To be able to address their needs because they are actually vulnerable based on what we're hearing. So to me, that's a very important information you have added to my this thing. My point that I want to ask right now is, we already have the traditional social protection, which I grew up in terms of your community supporting you. You understand? But in the Nigerian context right now, in terms of the formal and trying to capture the various parts of the country, what are we currently doing, or are there structures in place so that we can actually start developing, a formal approach? Because like here in the UK, for example, the system is developed. So, no matter where you are in the UK, whether you're in the West, East, whatever, as long as there's an issue, you are protected, irrespective of your color, race, or geographical this thing. Now, in the Nigerian context, what are we doing in that direction? And how can we, as non-governmentals, be taking active role in that? So that's my question.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Abdullahi.
Okay, I'm to respond, right?
Sure. And there is a comment. And
I was
also
thinking that I can see some two senior colleagues around, Dr. DeWitt and Jim Robinson. I was thinking that they will help me out. So what I'm going to do is I'll scratch the surface and then they should be able to complete what I'm going to say. Let me start with Gail Robinson. Now you asked a very important question. Really, I was even a party to a mentally ill person, a lady, right? And we tried as much as possible at the level of non-governmental organization to rehabilitate her, right? Now, I'm trying to share within the context of Nigeria and how we have not been able to key into the issue of mental health vulnerable persons. Now we try to rehabilitate her, but we were having problem with the former institution because they now say we don't have the license to rehabilitate her. We now say, okay, go ahead and rehabilitate her. Now they were unable to rehabilitate her. We took her to the mental health center in Kaduna. Unfortunately, the doctors were on strike. So some of the patients have to leave the hospital. That's the problem. That's the reality we are facing in Nigeria. So this is an area that I will appeal to all community development practitioners in Nigeria. It's not only happening in Kaduna State, but almost all over the country. The mental health vulnerable groups are not really taken into cognizance. So Dr. Obo, this is an area that we can all come together and see what we can do in collaboration with the formal institutions of social protection. And then this very question is very important to me because it means that after this discussion, I have to go back and then look at galvanize our social community development practitioners and those from the government side, and let's see how we can initiate a new discussion on the mentally ill person. Now, on the issue of reflection, and that is even one of the focus of this presentation, transformative reflection learning process is what I really advocate. And then I read some materials, I cannot remember some of the authors, but then it is now the vogue all over the place that community development can only move further with a lot of reflection, and then this transformative, and then some people call it transnational or transitional learning process of community community development, while some people consider it community well-being. So these are one of the areas that all of us will have to get involved into. Now, somebody put in the chat box, is it these social protection programs and then what we are discussing, is it not the dependency syndrome? Well, I don't know what you mean by the dependency syndrome, but what I know is that, yes, we all agree that our informal social protection system was partly destroyed by colonial masters, and then later on the neo-colonialists or African leaders never take it into consideration. There is this egoistic tendency, and then everything is wrapped down to myself, my family, my tribe, and then my village or something of that nature. So it's a very big problem. If that's what you consider dependency syndrome, then it's really a very big problem. And you know, as I said in one of the slides, that even when these transnational, this international, multinational donor agency come, their humanitarian activities is always short-lived and unstable. And they are involved in various areas, but I could also understand the logic behind why it is short-lived and unstable, because the essence of an international donor is not to be there permanently, but to help you get you relief and set up to the shocks or the emergency at that very point in time, so that you can be stable, you can have sustainability on your own. So in a situation where you fail to have sustainability on your own, you cannot be able to say it's if you depend on it, then that is dependency syndrome. And that is why immediately international donors leave, it is a responsibility of local community development practitioners to insist that what has been learned and what has been given as support should also continue. But at the same time, the community should look inward in seeing that they can be able to galvanize and synergize and then be able to be self-sustaining. The structures of social protection system. There are structures of social protection system in Nigeria, and it is even being implemented through the National Social Protection Investment Scheme, such as feeding, school feeding, cash transfer, and the rest of them. They are in Nigeria on paper and in cash, but then it is very, very selective. I must confess, it is very, very selective. So for example, why I'm talking of Kaduna State, because Kaduna State, the governor is also from the party of the president, and he was one that partly nominated the person to be minister of the social, the lady in the social development sector ministry. So because of that, we are able to, he has been able to corner some of those goodies to the state. But in some other cases where the state is in the opposition, then those things are brought in, but then they are only targeted to party loyalists and the rest of them and some elites. And then you know what about state capture? So the state also capture whatever it is. So at the end of the day, whenever fertilizer is given to farmers, it is ending up in the market, in the open market for other people to buy. I'm happy some of my colleagues from Kaduna are around. They can also testify to some of what I'm saying. So that is the issue of the structure of social protection system in Nigeria. Now, how can NGO, non-governmental organizations spring up and then take over this issue of vulnerability? It is very, very important. And that is why I said it can be done through community engagement. Community engagement is very, very important. And we cannot get to that level unless we also do some academic work. That is, for example, getting the need assessment and the rest of them, all the stages that is needed in community development. Then wherein we can also try to picture a situation where the community, the focus should be on how sustainable whatever intervention that is coming to the community, how it can be sustainable. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Abdullahi. We have 5 minutes to finish, and we have two two hands raised from Dr. Mina and Awaulu. But then before they come in, Dr. DeWitt and Jim Robertson, Abdullahi had appealed to you to make a comment. Jim, you are muted. Jim, you are muted.
Yes, I find some of the discussion very interesting, but I think also some of the points made in the chat from John Cornwall, for me, are very, very appropriate. And I suppose a concern I have is as to whether the basic principles of community wealth building are being applied in these situations, as to whether, for example, plural ownership of the economy, which I think is a basic community development principle, progressive procurement of goods and services, and socially productive use. So in some ways, how do we have policies which look at wealth creation, and how do we look at policies that actually identify those that are exploiting society? So I think social protection is very interesting, but it's in this wider context, and I do think that community development is very, very important. That it holds on to some really quite fundamental key principles, and we look at social protection in the light of these principles rather than as a kind of defense mechanism. So I hope that makes sense, Daniel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. David, a quick one.
Very quick one from my side. I appreciate the angle in which the presentation was done. It was an Africa-centered approach, which I really have a lot of appreciation for, because being in the rural environment, being a woman cultivating the lands is totally different from being a person in the first world in a city environment and a vulnerable person. Sustainable development in the African context for me is putting the decisions for the quality of life in the hands of the people, so they could have decision about their quality of life on their own. And that is why community development is not, it is to wean the community. It is change. It is continuous change. When we talk about sustainable development, it is sustainable development, which means change, continuous change. It's not sustainable stagnation. And that is the wrong side of community. Then you cultivate and nurture yourself. As I always say, we are in the business to get ourselves out of business. Then we will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think you are in touches. We have quite some bit of interest. We have four questions to come in, or comments. And of course, we are overrunning the time. If you can allow me, we can overrun the time by a few more minutes so that we can accommodate everybody, and then we'll be out. Okay, so let's go to Mina, Awaulu, then Cecile, and then lastly, Mudoni Kanara. Make it quick.
Hello. Okay. Hello. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. This is a very, very wonderful presentation, actually, very educative. And the follow comment also, I really gained something out of it. Doctor, I have something here which I wanted to ask. I want to ask about this social solidarity that is in the context of traditional social protection. Like here in Kano State, as where I'm living right now, in Kano State, there is this an olden days social solidarity, which we call it eating together. In Hausa language, we call it Chieya. This promote social protection in the sense of, neighborhood. You know the situation and the condition of your neighbor by maybe at night, they used to come together and eat. You bring your own food, I bring my own food. We sit down, we eat together. From there, I will get to know if you are having any problem or any difficulty, you are facing any problem at home. So from there, we will learn, we will see how we can raise and help each other. And this really help in cultivating a spirit of self-help. I don't know if this also can be part of this social protection measure. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Mina. Mina was joining us from the US very early in the morning. I hope she's still awake. Okay, Mina possibly has gone to, yeah, Mina is here. Mina, go ahead. As Mina gets ready, we can go to Cecil, Philippines.
Hi, good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock here. 5 o'clock here in the Philippines, and thank you for having me. Actually, I just want to share in Philippines perspective in transforming social protection delivery in the Philippines through PhilSys. Actually, this was shared by Nia Demidjup of Country Director of Brunei and Philippines. Social protection helps the poor and vulnerable in the country, especially in times of crisis. And shocks many.
There's quite a bit of noise in your background.
And by families, and of course, it threatens the well-being families in COVID-19 and hits the quarantines began. And the Philippines needed massive expansion of social protection coverage to mitigate the impacts of the pandemic countries. And that already had good inclusive digital infrastructure during internet connectivity, digital identification, digital payments, and integrated data ecosystem. So here in our country, we have a transforming social protection delivery through Philippine system. So it presented a challenge and strain was felt in the delivery social status under the Bayanihan Acts. Bayanihan means it's helping together, people go together to help those in need. So that's part of a community development work or initiatives here in our country. Fortunately, the country is moving up to address digital infrastructure gaps, and including through the development of the Philippines identification system. So here in our country, since we don't have one identification system, we develop one to identify one individual in identifying one most complex but also game-changing projects undertaken in the country. So for example, we are using different IDs to identify such individuals. So for now, our country make an initiative to have one Philippine identification system to promote, there's a unification or harmony of
Okay, Cecile, maybe I suggest you can type in your comment on the chat in the interest of everybody, since there's quite a bit of noise in the background. Just type a bit.
Yeah, sorry. Actually, there are groups of people coming in our office. That's why.
Yes, so just type it in the chat and then we'll pick it up from there. Thank you very much. So let's go to Mudhoni Kangara.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mudhoni Kangara from Kenya. I work with the State Department for Social Protection. And I just wanted to add a comment in our role as community development practitioners, especially in social protection. I believe during the targeting process, it is important that, I mean, our role comes out, because most of these programs, especially like the cash transfer programs, they get beneficiaries from the community, and they do community barazas, or those meetings at the community level. And it is important that our role is felt at that level. Also in Kenya, we the social protection has really grown, and we have the social protection policy, which can be found online. So if anyone is interested, they can look up on the State Department for Social Protection website and just read through. And also on the, as Dr. was presenting, he mentioned something on, there was a question on dependency syndrome. And I'll just like to mention a program that we are doing that I believe is helping the community in terms of growing wealth. And it's called the Kenya Economic Inclusion Program. And it's taking the graduation approach, whereby there will be different interventions for the beneficiaries. And one of them is giving an asset transfer, whereby we do a market analysis of the area, and they identify businesses that they can partake in. And they have mentors who work with them throughout the period of the program. They give them skills training, and they work with them for the period of, which is about 18 to 24 months during the period of the program. And I think this will really help in terms of just helping the community improve their livelihoods and break the dependency, and also just increase their savings and have an asset. So I believe that will be really important to look at in terms of how we are growing social protection in the country and across Africa, really. I think it's something that other nations could look at, and I think it's being implemented in very many African countries as well. Over.
Thank you, Mudhoni. You can share the link on the chat so that colleagues can follow up. I suggest maybe we can have a final word from Dr. Abdullahi, then I'll make quick announcements, and then we'll wind up. Mina, we are still waiting for you if you have a quick one. Abdullahi, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I just want to, Kacha said in the chat that what of lessons from other countries. You see, the issue of social protection, both formal and informal, is existing in almost all the countries of Africa. And then it is unique in different countries. For example, a country that has a lot of pastoralists is having the same problem all over. And then the country that has a group of farmers in the communities, generally the idea is that the formal social protection is mostly noticeable in the cities, and then some areas in some villages. Then the informal is almost common to everywhere, in every community. Even in the cities, you see some big estates coming together. They come together to protect themselves. They come together to assist each other. That's also informal solidarity, as what my brother called it. So what I'm trying to say is that if you want to carry a case study of Africa as a whole, then it is only going to be restricted to only either informal or formal protection system. That is why I try to touch, because the period of time will not allow us to show case studies in every part of the country. But I quite agree with the social development practitioner from Kenya. Kenya is one of the countries that, not because Daniel from Kenya, Kenya is one of the countries that have a very robust social protection program. I've gone through it. South Africa also has a very robust, then the issue, the political climate is what is affecting the social protection program in countries like Tanzania, Ghana, and Nigeria. Those countries are faced with a lot of political problems that is affecting formal social protection, making it very selective and the rest of them, and then very given to party cronies and some cabal, state capture and the rest of them. Why in the case of informal, it is almost all over the country, all over the continent. It's happening even in the Philippines, Malaysia, and the rest of them. You see that there's this spirit of assisting people, especially during festivals. People are now, and then what I failed to mention is that this informal, is based on religion and culture and kinship. So you can see in our churches and mosques, there's the tithes, and then there's the zakat and the rest of them, which also go a long way in alleviating the vulnerability of individuals. But also, please, I want us to take into cognizance what Gil said about the mental health. This is also very, very important. And then I want us to look at the mental health, not at the level of those who are in the street or alone, but even in our homes, we have a lot of mental health that need to be taken care of, some kind of rehabilitation, community orientation, and the rest of them. Thank you very much. And then all the comments that has been made, I know that after getting the Zoom recording, I'll go through it, and then I will now be able to see how I can improve on the paper in the next presentation, hopefully next year. Thank you very much, Daniel, and thank you very much, the IACD Secretariat that is doing a very good job. Thank you, Jim Robinson, and my very, very senior colleague. I respect him because I've been attending the webinars, and then I've been hearing his comment. It's very, I always look out whenever the two of them are around to see what they can say. And Lizzie and Dango Danjuma, I hope we shall be able to relate in Nigeria. Although Menu, I don't know whether I can give my senior colleague from Nigeria 1 minute to say something, Mina or Dr. Mina from the University of Port Harcourt. Daniel, please, that's a privilege of 1 minute to her. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. Now we need to wind up, but Mina is staying awake in the US to be with us. Let's just accord her a bit of a courtesy that she has stayed awake to be with us. If you can make it very quick.
Yes, real quick. My own is that my question is simple. Thank you for making my day and giving us such a fantastic presentation. My question is, we know we all become vulnerable at some point in the society. There appears to be, the role of social workers to promote, community development workers to promote social protection, and we keep saying for the forest of the poor. I have come to realize in Nigeria as a case study that this forest of the poor is only one cadre of people that are really poor. There are middle class that are really, really poor, and a lot of others are very vulnerable. What can community development, what can experts do to address that gap? That's all. Based on your presentation, what can community development workers do to addressing that very critical gap that seems to alienate middle class and a lot of other people who are actually the poor in the sense of it, as well as supporting strategically the poorest of the poor?
Just in a minute, Daniel, that's why I say we need this to a close. Okay, sorry. Yeah. That's why I say we need community engagement. And then the focus of community development practitioners should also shift. There has to be a paradigm shift, especially the middle class suffer more from mental health issues because of the trauma at the place of work, trauma in the community, and then the trauma everywhere in the environment. So there has to be a shift. What I'm saying is that the community development practitioners will have to have a shift, technical shift to those areas also. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we need to bring this one to a close. And this is one of the most engaging webinars we have had in the many series that we have had. And thank you very much for making it so lively. Thank you, John, for suggesting that. It looks like we need to extend our time from 1 hour to 1.5 hours. And I think going forward, possibly this is what we are going to try and do. So, and so as we start, then we can be having a wider scope. With some quick announcements, we have already lined up webinars up to January, and we are sharing already this. So be on the lookout. We will be giving specifics in terms of now the speakers as we go along. And thank you so much for the support. We can start populating the schedule for 2023. So, and be on the lookout. Liz is here, Mina is here, who is presenting, and our trustee from South Africa, Janine Ward, is making a master class in September. Let's be on the lookout. And so thank you very much for the support. And now from IACD, we have our World Community Development Conferences that are lined up. Already now we are working towards the World Community Development Conference 2022 in Georgia, hosted from Georgia, 53 days away. The submission of abstract is closed, but registration is ongoing. Then there is the World Community Development Conference from the Edge, hosted from Darwin, Australia, 2023. Again, submissions are already open. Let's be on the lookout. These are opportunities for us to continue networking. Thank you very much. And now, as we sign off, maybe we can allow ourselves to take a picture. Maybe if you can manage for our social media platforms.
Yeah, I'd love to.
That we are present.
I'd love to get a picture of everybody's faces.
If you can unmask yourself, that will be indication that you are giving consent for your photo to be taken. If you unmask yourself, Meredith can take a picture.
I'll give everyone a few seconds to turn your cameras on, and then I'll tell you as I'm about to take the picture.
Meredith, when you're ready, we are ready for you.
All right, when everyone's ready, we'll take the picture on 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, great job, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and see you in the next masterclass presentation in September. Thank you very much for making it a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.